Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about interesting problems. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, what are some examples of interesting problems that you look to deal with on a day-to-day basis? Well, if you're talking professionally, it's one thing. If you're talking about it privately, it's another thing. Privately, the most interesting problems that I try to do or try to fix is usually things that I think they will be educational for my own sake, but because they pose like a mental conundrum or something I don't really understand, or like how would you do this thing, and then it's almost like I'm educating myself through the coding, where I'm trying to solve a problem that I don't fully understand, uh, and by doing so I would learn things. And it can be anything. It can really come down to anything that I find interesting. It's everything from, building my own programming language, or can I figure out how to optimize execution speeds of end-to-end tests? Like, can I figure out how to selectively write, like what code has actually, in a relevant way, changed? So can I figure that out? What should be run? What code should execute in the test? What should not be executed in the test? Are there, like, I have personal projects which are like more product oriented, where we had at work a few years back a manual process that was done by people who had like let's just say it was very slow and not that efficient. So I thought, well, if I understood this process, maybe I could create a tool that basically goes to all of these places and scrapes like the data that is necessary, presents it in the way that like the people who are using it want it to, and then they can like optimize their workflow, so they like do a more, if make this a more effective work process, if that makes sense. And like I have other examples which are like more like today these days mostly about AI based things that I try to sort of figure out, thinking about, can I generate can I use AI based learning to teach an AI to create profiles. In this case it's a fantasy game type of thing, where I've been experimenting with randomness and pseudo randomness, and trying to compose it, like adding in AI into that mix to generate character sheets for different characters in a fantasy world, for example, just because I want to figure out if I could simulate basically the birth of a fictional character, and then further down the line, can I actually generate evolution, in essence? Like, can I simulate the evolution of this character over time and see how far I can stretch that, and just see where the limits are? And it gives me a chance to learn a bit about AI and like the different models and like the different ways that you can apply this this knowledge. These are things that I do for private reasons. When it comes to interesting problems at work, it's usually about figuring out optimizations. Almost everything is about optimizations. Because the long and short of what you're doing as a software engineer, as I've said a few times before, at least this is my belief, the heart and soul of it is that you are trying to take usually a physical process, something that people are doing either manually or in a less optimal way, and you're trying to figure out how can you use software in order to make this faster, more efficient, more reliable, etc., etc. Sometimes it's other computer systems, of course, but that is in essence what you're doing. You're trying to just optimize things to a point where it's streamlined enough that, well, it's really not worth optimizing anymore, at least not at the current stage as things are. And so for me, that can involve quite a lot of stuff. When you're working in just a product company, or like a product team, then there's not much in terms of like experimentation. It depends on the team, of course, but it's not like, then you have prepared stores usually. You have like deliverables that you're going to work on. So in terms of interesting problems, it's not as often that you do, the ratio is different than what it is for me these days, where now I'm basically that's all I do. My entire job description has become, all right, these are all the issues that we have, fix them, basically. And these are usually systematic issues or issues within different systems or so forth, or like work processes. And then, as I said, it comes down to understanding those processes. You go to a bunch of meetings, you go and talk to all the people, and then you do the thing that I usually do. I listen to people complain. That's my favorite thing, because when people complain, they give you an insight into what they care about, and an insight into what things are not working, and that gives me a checklist of things that I can take a look at, which is why complaining is a very good thing. I think, at least if you want inspiration for future ideas and so forth as a software developer. And so I usually talk to software developers these days at work, where it's sort of, I sit in, like I have my own team, and well, I don't just have one team, I have 2 teams now. And so you sit in and you have, like I usually have like a once a week meeting with them to sort of sync up, and then I meet different teams across the company as I go along and try to talk to them, establish some friendly chats with them, and see, okay, during stand-ups and so forth, what are they complaining about. And so, like just yesterday, for example, there was an issue where there was someone had dropped the fact that they were fairly, like one of the guys in one of my teams had complained about that the backend guy, in this case it was a front-end developer, he had been saying that the backend developer's setup was really, really weird, because there was no model validation on any of the requests he sent, so he could basically put in anything and send it to the backend. And me, knowing that that's a Java backend, thought that that was kind of weird, because usually there's some type of server-side validation. It has to have, well, depending on system now, but usually that's the norm. So I thought, all right, let's just sit in on a talk or two with the backend developers. Turns out that they had inherited that second-hand as a second-hand or second-generation code base, and the prior people who had been developing it had developed their own framework or their own library, which in effect, as far as I could see at least, because then like basically she like had to look at it, as they explained it, it opts out of the class system and the type system of Java. So basically the entire thing is built with a map system instead, which in effect is the same thing as using like a untyped data structure for everything. Like all the keys are just strings and all the values can be in theory anything. And I still haven't really gotten, I still didn't really, like, I haven't gotten to the point where I've had a chance to talk to the guy who actually made that, because I'm not even sure if that guy is still here. Maybe he is. What was the reasoning behind doing that? And so while they were talking, which is one of the things that I love about being sort of a jack of all trades, while they were complaining, I basically sat in on their meeting while they were talking, because they're so quote-unquote used to just having this conversation between themselves and not front-end developers. And of course I'm being I get labeled as the front-end developer. And so one of them says to me like, oh yeah, Fredrik, we're boring you with all this back-end talk. And I said, no, not at all. While you've been talking, I pulled down the repo, installed IntelliJ, been trying to spin up the server. I'm going to need to get your access credentials to pull the dependencies from our Maven repo, and already taken a look at those things, and it seems like we could actually instantiate this thing ourselves. We could basically undo a lot of this if we just put some effort to it. And there's like sort of like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, like I'm here. You think like I right now I'm managing this front end team, or like that's what I'm helping this company with. But I've been a full stack developer for many years, so you can talk shop with me. Don't worry about it. It's likely, I mean, and I went through the POM file, dependencies, and you're basically using all the same things I've been using for quite some time. So what I want you to take away from this is that the problems that I usually solve on a daily basis is, for private reasons, it's more like educational things, like theoretical curiosities, either for my own education or for experiments to see if I can build something that I don't truly fully understand how to do, because I find it interesting to sort of Like, I like thinking about things, and it's sort of like in a sense, it's a little bit like writing for some people. Like you gather your thoughts by writing, and in my world, it's sort of like I have different computational problems or different challenges within IT, or like the mental things that I wanted to see if I can make happen, and I use coding to see if I can experiment my way through and getting some insight into those curiosities, if that makes sense. And for professional reasons, it's usually optimization things. Like, it's really the same. I think that's most of what software developers are doing when they're not working on specifically. I mean, you can almost always say that. I mean, anything you do can fall under that bucket. But I hope that you understand what I'm saying. There is a lot of time that I spend on like trying to do everything from streamlining the way that you write unit tests to refactoring code to, I mean, if they have stories or so forth, we have to ship something in the product space, or like product development, and I do that, etc., etc. I mean, when I was a junior, it was mostly product related work, but that in of itself is sort of falls under the same sort of roof. Like, when you're working on a product story, the thing that most people in software are looking for when in terms of fixing problems is that they find things that are ugly in the code that could be a little bit nicer, and then we do the Boy Scouting, or we do a refactor or something like that. And that's practically everything. Almost everything can be quote unquote boiled down to optimization or improvement of a workflow or simplification of development or so forth. It's all about reliability usually, and how fast you can deliver. These two things go hand in hand for almost everything that I do, and I think that most people spend their time fixing in IT. Have a great day.